welcome to another exciting show. And no, we're not invading Poland tonight, are we, Andrew? Because tonight we've got Andrew Johnson, our guest, and it's good to be back after being a very naughty boy and being banned by YouTube. I've had a big smack, and they said that if I do it another time, they'll tell my mummy, which will be a bit difficult. They'll have to go to the cemetery. But anyway, there we go. So welcome, everybody, and thank you very much. And remember, if this is taken down or anything else is taken down, details are on BitChute. And I actually did a video for BitChute, and you can find details below. Also, the show that was taken down last week, you can see a beautiful prestige copy of it. Thank you very much. I haven't had permission to use say the person's name, but somebody very kindly recorded it before it was taken down, and they sent me this copy, and it's on my Rumble channel. So I've got Rumble, Odyssey, and BitChute, as well as YouTube. So please look at the list down below. There's a link to my Rumble channel, and you'll be able to see the show that was taken down with Jerry Mowinski. So, and I think you'll find it very interesting. Also, I will shortly be going over to, people say Rumble. I prefer Odyssey. I think it's a lot better, Odyssey, but we'll see. But don't worry, I won't leave you high and dry. I will be telling everybody where I'll be migrating to, but I cannot keep on YouTube because, quite honestly, the censorship is claustrophobic. And I had a feeling when Jerry, I'm not blaming Jerry, but when Jerry was talking, I thought, we're going to be taken down. But I thought, let him speak, let him get it off his chest. And I think that sometimes when things are censored, censorship is, as I said, the last bastion of tyrants, because truth doesn't need censorship. It's pure. And censorship always shoots itself in the foot. So it doesn't really bother me that much in that sense, although it's frustrating that it's taken down. But censorship makes people interested. And my BitChute channel absolutely shot up the audience on there. So, and also to make up for last Monday when I couldn't broadcast, I was banned. Tomorrow I'm doing a recorded show with some mystery guests, give you a moment, which will be put on my BitChute, not YouTube, BitChute channel over the weekend. So that's something to see. Okay, but that will be recorded because it's lots of naughty things we're talking about, which we'll get a slap on the wrist with YouTube. So over to you, Andrew. Welcome to the show. Thank you. And it's always a fascinating show with Andrew Johnson. And I'm sure everybody's saying, how's Richard D. Hall? So is it possible to give us an update, Andrew, on Richard D. Hall?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think for those that are signed up to his email list, there's no, you know, they won't, everything I say won't be new to them. As I said just before we came on briefly, the last update of any substance from Richard was in June. I'll put a link in the chat window there. I can get this up on the screen as well. Oh, it has, yeah, it's giving me an error message there, but I'll put this link on the screen if I can. So let me just see if I can do that. I'm going to try and share my screen now. Share screen.
I'm actually on his email list, so
okay.
You
know, I mean, I will go through. I will go through this again.
Because it's been sort of, shall we say, I'm on his email list, but it's been very quiet, too quiet.
Yeah.
So, you know, as they say in the Western films.
Yeah. So I'm just going to actually, let's just try and put this in another window. But basically, he's been working on this case because of his investigation into the Manchester bang, where, you know, there's this alleged explosion, or there was a sound of an explosion in Manchester Arena, and supposedly people died, but Richard disputes this, you know, he was basically then went and saw some. He went up to Manchester and did a lot of investigation there, and then one of the families, Martin Hibbert, one of the people allegedly involved, has now you know, filed against Richard in court. But interestingly, they filed for harassment not for, you know, defamation of character or calling them a liar. So right off the bat there, that is very interesting. Now, the update in June, which again, I'll just try, I just didn't quite work what I was going to do. So let me just put that in there. The update in June from Richard was regarding the actual documents in which his defense and the case against him, you know, those two documents became available in the court system, the High Court system. I think it's the King's Court now that it's called. Let me just see if I can get that up now, because people can just get a bit of a gist of what I'm on about. Where I was, if I go back to that again and back to here, share screen, and then I hope I can do. There we go. Yeah, so you should be able to see that now. And this is the page that I posted the link to in the chat box. It's on my website, so you can go to checktheevidence.com. If you're on a laptop or a desktop, you'll see this menu down the right-hand side. And if you scroll down a bit, you'll see Richard D. Hall, Manchester Court Case Documents. So this is really the latest update from Richard, which would I say was back in June. There's nothing new to add to this since June. And it lays out the claim against him by Martin and Eve Hibbert, who were allegedly injured in the attacks or in the events, which wasn't really an attack. Nothing actually, you know, was done really. There's just firework was let off, we think.
Allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly, indeed.
Allegedly.
So you know, the whole, according to the mainstream media, the whole event's true. But Richard has gathered his evidence against the official narrative. And anyway, so that's all there. You can go and read those court documents, see what you think. And that was really the last update. I've exchanged a couple of messages with him briefly. We've still been, you know, I've been sending him books and stuff to sell on his website, and he's, you know, he's been selling those. So when he's run out, he's asked me to send more. So had that kind of communication. But other than that, you know, he's just keeping his head down. Really, I think he's just kind of make sure he does the best he can with this case. And he's kind of tied down with it, you know. And they're just trying to stop him from doing what he's doing, you know, as we know, either financially or in his activities. And if essentially they've achieved that, you know, because he has for the moment stopped making videos. Although I will say that even before all of this kicked off, he was, you know, he wasn't producing as many videos, you know. I mean, like he's been doing it for over 10 years now, and. But no, I actually started investigating all this stuff in 2003, and I've been writing stuff and posting stuff for nearly 20 years now. So that's a good chunk of my life, you know. So you do sometimes get to a point of saturation, really, and that's certainly the case to a greater or lesser extent with many of us. And so that's you know, an update on Richard. Really, he's still around. He has been depressed by what's happened. You know, it has made an impact. I mean, obviously, one hopes that you can ride above it, but if, of course, you're under threat of getting your house taken away from you, or your assets or something, then obviously that's a very depressing thing to have hanging over your head. Even if, you know, you think the prospect of it is quite weak, you know, that would happen, it's still there, isn't it? You know, and when anyone faces a situation like that, creates a lot of stress. So there's really no more of an update than that, I suppose, to say, to say that.
Also, I believe he still needs help with funding for his case.
So you can go to his website, richplanet.net, and you can donate to the funds there. You know, I think he will still probably use most of those funds in the case, but I'm not sure what the next step will be. We will just have to see. You know, I'm sure he'll post an update when he's ready to, and so just watch out for that and visit his website occasionally. I think he is on Facebook as well, but I can't remember how often he updates Facebook. Not very much. So, you know,
I think it's richplanet.net, isn't it?
Net, that's correct. Yes,
that's right. I'll see if I've got it in the banners. I don't think I've got it in the banners here, but I'll type it out probably as we're talking. And I think in fact I'll do it right away. So it's
you might get it twice. I'll type it as well. So
planet net. I think that's okay, and I'll just add banner. There we go, and I'll show that.
Okay.
That's richplanet.net, and
Yeah.
to me, I would say that he's a genuine journalist, a proper journalist. There's been very few
Oh, very
proper
much so. You know,
journalists.
and somebody I know in Jersey was saying, well, what do you actually accept what it says then, and why the BBC said all these things about him? You know, it's a very serious thing. You know, and this guy couldn't understand why the BBC had done what they'd done because they're on a really sticky wicket. If this case gets thrown out, the BBC is in real trouble. I mean, we know it's in real trouble anyway because of all the Jimmy Savile affair and the Prince Andrew thing and all that stuff and all the other stuff we know about now. But this case is very important because the basis of it is so clear, really. You know, like with the COVID narrative, for example, that's very complicated. But when you see with the Manchester case, the basis of it is actually quite simple. So once people understand it, it's an easy hoax to understand, so to speak.
Or
Um,
alleged
so
one, because we've got to
alleged
be very
hoax, an easy
careful. Yeah,
alleged hoax.
yes,
So yeah, so
because
that it is. And this is the whole thing with what we're saying about censorship, isn't it? So there you
well,
are.
this is it. I mean, my view, as I said on my video when I was kicked out off of YouTube, and that is, I truth is pure. It doesn't need censorship.
Mm, mm,
Only
mm.
lies need censorship, and censorship
That's
is the
right.
last bastion of tyrants. So, my
Correct.
feeling is that there's an old saying said by somebody. What was it now? I disagree with what you're saying, but I fight to the death to hear what you have to say. Something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very true one because we, the people that watch this show, I like to believe, are highly intelligent, and it's up to them
Yeah.
to believe or disbelieve or whatever I put over. I try not to form an opinion because that's not the job of the host. I have broken that occasionally. I've formed an opinion, but what I mean to say is that it is, it's an insult to all of our intelligence, and not only that, it's an
Mm.
insult to our ancestors who supposedly fought for freedom of speech, but supposedly.
Yes,
So,
indeed,
you
indeed.
know, so that's it. Well, if you can, if you've got a few bob, if you like to help Richard, because we do, he does rely on us. And also, if you can't send money, send some positive thoughts towards him, because that does
Absolutely,
help.
absolutely.
That can help. Emotional, just positive thoughts, because he's got guts. He's got a wife and a young child, and I think that he's got to support them, and he's obviously very worried about them as well. So good luck, Richard. I'm sure you'll pull through. You'll win through in the end. So there we
Absolutely.
are.
Yeah, I mean, other people also asked me on this sort of area because we've recently obviously passed one of the 22nd anniversary of 9/11, so I often get asked about Dr. Judy Wood, and yeah, she's fine. She's still sort of uh, looking after chickens, living her life in South Carolina, and she does interviews when she's asked to do interviews and things like that. But she keeps herself busy with her own interests and stuff, and she looks in on the web and occasionally responds to emails. But she's generally, she's less active than she was,
Mhm.
but she's basically fine. So. Just for anybody that's wondering, we do message each other every week, once
Quite.
every couple of weeks, so we're still in communication with each other. We did, of course, get this Maui incident in, I think it was the beginning of August, first or second week of August. And actually, that everyone was saying, oh, directed energy weapons were used in Maui.
Got to be a bit
And I
careful.
made a, well, this is it.
Yeah.
But what we're going to talk about, So,
Mm.
and there's been a lot of videos on YouTube about that, so I think we're pretty safe there.
Yeah.
There's been a
That
lot of
sounds
videos on YouTube.
good.
Um, there are other videos saying different things, as there always are, but I wanted to point out that this use of weapons there, people are likening it to 9/11, and there's not really enough information to say exactly what happened. And as we've pointed out on multiple occasions, if you want to do an investigation thoroughly, you need to go to the site, you need to interview witnesses, you need to take look at physical evidence or look at scientific studies of the physical evidence to work out what happened. And Dr. Judy Wood, when she was investigating 9/11, she was investigating it for 3 years before she posted anything on the web. And people were posting things at Maui like 12 hours after it happened, 24 hours, saying it was, directed energy weapons or something. You can't really do that with any certainty. It's just not.
Spot on.
It's not a good idea. And again, people saying, "Oh, look at all these burnt cars, Andrew. They're exactly like 9/11." Well, hang on. Some are these cars really like the ones that not on 9/11, the toasted cars? Well, they're actually not, because some of them show evidence of high heat, and there are very few that are actually anomalous from what I've seen. So, and the whole series of events in Maui it's not that similar to 9/11. We did see evidence of fires. We saw those aerial views from the helicopters. Things did burn. Trees did burn. And it wasn't like that on 9/11. So they are different events. So we've got to be careful what we assume and what we say. My personal conclusion is that the official narrative of wildfires in Maui is probably not correct. But the fact that there were some hot fires is probably correct. And there is some anomalous damage. I've seen some evidence of that. So something strange did happen in certain places, and the way that it was treated was very strange in certain ways. And the whole tie-in with the blue roofs and the Agenda 2030 and the smart cities and all of that. And there was a conference about a smart city or a smart town about in June or something. I forget the exact date. And the Hawaii governor was there, and it was all related to some UN sustainability initiative or something. People have done videos about that, and yes, there's definitely something in that, and the same might be said for what happened in California with the wildfires then in 2017, and I think other places after 2017. So, I'm not saying that the alternative media is completely wrong and wrong to say that there wasn't foul play in Maui and things weren't done that they're not telling you about. I think there probably were things, but I think the danger is, once you get into the conspiracy world, is that you go beyond what the evidence tells you. And you also have to look at where the evidence has come from and who's saying what. For example, so there was a story that received quite a bit of traction that Chinese satellites were logged over Maui and exactly the point when the two of the fires started, or three of the fires, and I forget the name of this website. And he's got all this data and maths and figures from this CCP satellite, which is allegedly of unknown payload. They know this CCP satellite is there, but allegedly they don't know what the satellite does. And he did a very interesting web page. I had a look at that. But again, did that cause the directed energy? Was it a beam from space or something? He claims that it's proved, but as somebody said to me, somebody who I have been in touch with for quite a few years, he thinks that a lot of that data could have been deliberately leaked through that person to create that narrative about these Chinese satellites starting the wildfires in Maui. And when he said this to me, I thought, oh yeah, he's got a point there. They could do this. It could be another psyop, and it would be relatively easy to pull it off as well. So you've got to be careful about what you sort of assume and where the evidence comes from, and you've got to study that as much as possible. And that, of course, is what I've tried to do over the years. And I've been caught out, more than once. And I was definitely caught out with 9/11, and I've been caught out with other things too, not 9/11. So I'll openly admit that.
Well, controlled opposition gives you some truth and some lies, and this is the thing. They get people, shall we say, it's what I call Pied Piper type situation, where they get people hooked on. And yes, I will mention it, GB News and people like that. Yes, they're telling people what they want to hear, and they get hooked on it, and then they start nudge techniques. And we had week before last, I believe it was, Shannon, and she lives in Northern California in the woods, and she was evacuated because of the fires around her. So we had first-hand report. And what she said was it was the mentality of the fire. The fire crews were experienced, but it's the one people that's ruling them. All they did is have meetings and pontificate about it, but didn't really do anything. And where once
Mm,
upon a time the
mm,
fire crews would be left, they would be out and dealing with the fires. They
yeah.
were had to go to meetings and things. And she said it was as if, and the other things, they only pay the fire crews in Northern California if there's a fire. Well, I would have thought it'd been better the other way around, pay them if there isn't a fire. So it's in their interest not to be a fire. Because you think about it, if you pay them not to have a fire, it's a bit like Chinese medicine. They used to pay the doctor when they were well, and when they were sick, they stopped paying them. So,
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
really, it'd be in their interest that if there's little sparks somewhere, oh, they put it out because they won't get paid if there's a fire. So it seems illogical to pay people if there's only a fire, because
Hmm.
the word. I'm not blaming anybody, but you think there's always one bad apple in everything. One bad apple might start to do arson. You never know. And I'm not accusing because I don't know. I've got no evidence. But
Sure, and so you sometimes, although for example, on 9/11, there was witnesses were planted, like this Mark Walsh guy. He
mm,
was definitely a planted witness who gave a story out. Admittedly, it wasn't in the same circumstances as what you just described in California. It's very different. Um, so, certain witnesses seem to be planted to create a narrative, help create a narrative. So that's why you've got to weigh up all the evidence, both physical, any scientific evidence, you get
mm.
any scientific data, and weigh that all together to establish what actually happened. And sometimes there are contradictions, and they can't easily be resolved. So you've got to be careful what assumptions you make and what how you assess the evidence. And it's not easy. It's not easy to do this.
Well, that's right. I mean, I'll give you a perfect example, which happened when I was a child, and my grandfather used to. My granddad, he used to go to a cafe each day to have his lunch, and it was a plate glass window in front of this cafe. It's quite modern, decked out for its time.
Mm,
And a van came skidding off the road and went straight through the plate glass window. Luckily, nobody
wow.
was injured. And the newspaper office, the local newspaper, was opposite this cafe. So it was a story that
Yeah.
had landed on there, and it was a mid-July day. So the windows are open, and there was staff eating their lunch. It was lunchtime, looking out the windows. It was absolutely perfect. And about a couple of days later, I was with my granddad when the free newspaper came through the door. And he opened it
Yeah.
up, read it, and he was an eyewitness. He saw exactly what happened. And he said,
Yeah.
that's lies, that's lies, that's lies. And what it happened is the journalist was probably at lunch. He came along a bit later and then um, just sort of put a story together. Now, if anybody looks at, hello, what's happening? You're going on and off there. If anybody looks at that story, they'll read the newspaper and think it's the newspaper's report and think it is true when it was about 90% lies. It was just made up. My granddad said, this is nothing. This didn't happen. That didn't happen. This didn't. And he actually saw it. And this is the thing. And you can't go by what newspapers say. And the best journalists I've found are not the people that's been to college and studied it. It's the Richard D. Halls of this world. And
Yeah. Well, that's right.
yeah,
And I think, you know, I'll give you a related example like that I have direct experience of. And there was a journalism student that contacted me. This was probably about 10 years ago. And it was in relation to Dr. Judy Wood's research. It was a story about 9/11. And they had a very specific set of questions, which I thought were very good questions. And I gave the honest answers to those questions. And I honestly can't remember what the questions were, what my answers were. But I remember this person's thought about these questions, and they're good questions. And she wasn't trying to debunk conspiracy theories or anything like that, or at least not that wasn't the apparent objective of these questions. That she'd sent to me. And so I sent, and then I think she wrote it up, and I think she sent us a copy of this wherever it was. I can't remember much about it, but what I realised is this student was only really after the story or elements of the story enough to actually get the word count or whatever it was that she was attempting to fill, or to finish her journalism assignment or whatever it was. She didn't really care particularly about whether the story was, or whether I was being truthful or not. She did accurately report what I'd said, and that, but she didn't care about the implications of it. There was no discussion, and the implications were huge. You know, when we were talking about the towers having turned to dust or something like that. And like, as long as she got this 1,000 words that she needed for whatever it was, either to meet her deadline for a newspaper or a student newspaper or something, but she didn't actually care about the implications. And that's what really struck me about that element of journalism at that point. You know, is that she was interested in certain facts and a certain story, but beyond that, she didn't really seem to have any. She didn't have a soul about it. She didn't have any feelings about it. You know, and that
Oh,
kind of got
yes.
to me. You know.
I've come across that. I mean, about 23 years ago, my father wrote a book about his wartime experiences, and that was sort of the internet was in its infancy then, and I sent to local newspapers. Quite innocently, I wouldn't do it now, but it was a different time then. And this young journalist who just left school wrote an article, and I actually sent a press release. I wrote it all down, what my dad did. My dad was in D-Day and that. And
Yeah.
what the journalist said, and my dad was also in Malta. My dad saw a flying boat that was bombed in Malta. A big story about it, and how it strafed and that. He was an eyewitness. And then the journalist wrote he saw a seaplane. There's a difference between a flying boat and a seaplane. A seaplane has actually got floats at the bottom of it, and a flying boat
Yeah.
is actually what it says it is. It's a boat that's sort of flying, you know, like a Sunderland flying boat. And then this journalist said, got muddled up with the wars. My dad was in World War Two. This was up in North Essex. My dad was stationed there for a very short while, and said he was in, was it radio operations? My dad wasn't. Where he got that from, I do not know. And then went overseas to fight the Viet Cong. That was the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
That was with the Americans. Nothing to do with us. And that was
Yeah.
in the 60s. This was in the 40s that my dad was in the Second World War. And they got a mass of complaints in. And the complaint letters were sent to us saying, this man don't know what he's talking about. What a rubbishy book. And all that. Just because the journalist, and I actually sent to the editor and I said, look, I want an official apology about this. This is the what I sent you. And the journalist has made up a pack of lies and has made my father look stupid. Could I have an apology, please? And I didn't get any reply at all. I should have gone to the Press Complaints Commission, but I didn't. But what use is that, really? That's pointless. But the damage had already been done. And my dad, it was really frustrating for him because, you know, it's just a load of rubbish. And what this journalist had done, she'd muddled up the, I think it was the time when Saving Private Ryan film was out. Muddled up
Okay.
Saving
Yeah.
Private
Yeah.
Ryan. No,
Yeah.
not Saving Private Ryan. And there was another one about Japan. And she muddled it
Right.
all up. No, it was a Vietnam War, not Platoon, something like that. So she muddled up the Vietnam War with World War II because she didn't understand history. So she said my father went off to fight the Viet Cong.
Yeah. Yeah. It's mad, isn't it,
Unbelievable.
what they get wrong
Loopy.
sometimes? Yeah.
Yeah.
You know.
But Dad has never been anywhere near Vietnam. He's English, you know, he wouldn't do. But this is the thing. But
Yeah.
it is frustrating. Anyway, before we sort of go on to our main topics tonight, do you want to have a quick look in chat, Andrew, and see what people are saying and that, or shall we go
Yeah.
straight in?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll go.
I'll have a
Go
quick
in.
look. I think it's just more. I haven't seen any questions yet, but
No,
by all means,
no.
go through that and see.
We've got Mark Anthony, Cat Holly. Hello, Cat. Hello, Bob. Bob Hollyoak. We must put him up here. He's actually the first one about 7:30, sometimes 6 o'clock. He comes on, waiting patiently for the show to start. So he gets the brownie points, and it's normally closely followed by Cat. Hello, Cat. Thank you very much for coming on, everybody. Of course, we've got Louise, and hello, Louise, and Angela Davis, And an interesting one here from, I like this, Hereditors Get Fucked. Freedom is another word for nothing left to lose. Yes, that's interesting. Yes, yes. Now, oh, hang on. I like this one. What Louise has said. If the BBC say it, it is BS. Yes, I know this sounds weird, but I mean, I haven't looked at the television for years, 13, 14 years. And I was in the bank a couple of years ago, and they've got this great big screen on the wall, which you couldn't really miss it. And they had BBC News 24. And it was actually making me feel ill. It was so awful. It was literally affecting me psychologically. It was horrible. Right. Ancient Ruby. Evening, Chris and everyone. I'm not too good. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Let's hope everybody wish Ancient Ruby well, and we'll send some healing thoughts to you. How's that? So I may not comment much unless my mouth starts running away with itself rather, because truth has to be said. Hope you're all well. Well, I wish you better, Ancient Ruby, and we'll send some
Me too,
healing
yes, I hope you're
thoughts to
better.
you. And I'm sure you're going to feel a lot better soon, you know. And Bob Hollyoak has said, oh, by the way, Louise and everybody, sending healing thoughts. And we've got here, they mix 5% truth with 95% lies to fit agendas. Yes, yes. And then we got here, Mark Anthony says, many of Richard D. Hall's critics have never watched any of it. Very good point. Any of his films or
That's true,
read his
Mark, yeah.
book. They just parrot the mainstream media in their opinions. Yes, that is 100% true, Mark. That really is. I mean, I've met Richard several times, and I speak as I find. He shook my hand, a nice solid handshake, looks you straight in the eye. Honest bloke, straightforward, you know. Now it says here, controlled op. This is Bob Hollyoak. Is in the so-called truth movement. Oh, don't tell. We could do a whole show about that. How the truth movement has been infiltrated, but that's another subject. Yes, and we got Chris the Gardener. Evening, one and all. I'm a bit late. All lines for you, but here now. Good to have you back, Chris. Thank you very much, Chris. And Chris is coming on this time next week, if I'm not banned. So he'll be on next Thursday. He doesn't know yet. No, he does actually. Now it says, Louise says, if we don't care for each other, then we are useless as a species. Quite correct. That's how you test civilization, by the way they care for the underdog. That is, you know, civilization does that, you know. Well, I think we've got enough here. Let's have a look. Let's get any questions. If you could put any questions in capitals, that would help us a lot. And Ancient Ruby
Or you could
says,
start with like Q or something, Q and a colon, or
yes, if
QQ,
you like
QQ,
that.
something like
Yes.
that, just so that we
Well,
can see it in the chat.
yeah, that's right. So far away, Andrew, because I think it's a topic I'm fascinated in. So
Yeah,
I'll start
sure.
with the crops or the other subject that you mentioned.
Well, we'll do the alternative agriculture one, which goes into the crop discussion as well. So we'll look at
Oh,
that video
okay.
for sure. There's one
Right.
additional thing I was going to say in relation to, I think it was something to do with what we were discussing about the BBC, and I'm trying to remember what it was. My point of saying it. Somebody had said, that the BBC is all bogus and whatnot, and
Bullshit.
yeah, I was trying to be nice, and so yeah, and it was something in relation to that. Maybe I'll remember as we're going through the rest of it. But oh yeah, in fact, yeah, what it was to do with Richard again, what Mark had said, and I think why the BBC have targeted Richard particularly is his documentaries, as I kind of implied but didn't say openly earlier on, are very damaging to the BBC. You got the Jill Dando investigation that he did. That's very revealing. That's damaging to the BBC directly. You've got the Madeleine McCann series of documentaries, very, very damaging to the BBC, very damaging. And then you've got the latest Manchester one, also very damaging to the BBC. I mean, the other stuff, the 9/11 stuff, that's sort of a lot older now, and people are beginning to forget about that, and people have lived full lives since it happened, sort of thing. And but I think that's why the BBC have really gone out on a limb, and they're on a really sticky wicket with this case. If they can't get something out of it, and I think I think it's really an act of retribution against Richard, because his other documentaries are so damaging to them. And if you look at that update where he goes through how this case actually started, and he doesn't make any claims beyond the evidence, but it does look like Mariana Spring was pretty well involved in how this legal case started behind the scenes. He didn't have direct evidence, but he does come up with some interesting links, which suggest that. So that's just to kind of to round off that discussion, really, and
well,
before we go on to the next one.
If Richard was saying a load of old rubbish or pack of lies or anything like that,
that's right.
And if the BBC was so truthful, they would have nothing to worry about, because they said, well, our truth holds up. I mean, if I was to say that, I don't know, the moon is made of gorgonzola cheese, okay, ridiculous statement. Well, I've got a right to say that, and people have got a right to say, well, you're talking a load of old rubbish, because it isn't. Now, the thing is, you wouldn't have any a proper scientist wouldn't have any worries at all if I said, I was Professor whatever and I found out that the moon is made of cheese, because the truth is the truth. And you can say, well, it's rubbish, but you can carry on saying it if you want, but it's a load of rubbish. You'd have nothing to worry about whatsoever. This is the thing. Truth doesn't need this. And I've actually seen that film when she actually did this sort of microphone in your face routine, and it angered me, and he handled it very well. But it's very angry, this idea of sort of shoving a microphone up your nose as if you're guilty before I even open my mouth. And
well, that sort of situation, you're damned if you engage and you're damned if you're not. In other words, if he just stood there and said no comment, no comment, no comment, which some people would have advised him to do, he can end up looking as if he's just been evading all the questions, But what they did was they edited that clip. The act itself, was bad enough, but they did actually edit it, and that made it that got them where they want what they wanted with that clip. They edited it just for a couple of seconds. They edited and changed it. So there you are. Okay.
That's right. Anyway, by the way, before we go any further, there's an interesting one coming in chat. J. Alfred Baldwin. Evening, all you guys. Heard
I'm familiar with
channel
that,
Heard of the channel Farsight Institute? It's remote viewing. Their 9/11 target viewing seems to confirm Dr. Judy Wood's work. Also, their Roswell incident is interesting. Thank you very much for that. That's interesting. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, the Farsight Institute, that's run by a guy called Courtney. What's his name? Oh, I forget his second name. I might remember it.
Sorry, I can't help you there.
No, I wasn't expecting you to help me. Oh gosh. But this Farsight Institute, yes, he's a remote viewer. Yes, he was trained, I think, under Ed Dames, and their stuff is very inconsistent. They, for example, in 2010, remote viewed 2012 and said that the Earth was just a wasteland. Well, folks, it's not. Here we are in 2023, and the Earth is not a wasteland. Might not be certain things that are not great. So, Farsight Institute treat with a note of caution. Depends when they remote viewed Dr. Judy Wood's, 9/11 or whatever. I think I did hear something that they said about 9/11 years ago, and it was not. It was sufficiently vague that it could have been interpreted multiple ways. This is not to say that I think the technique of remote viewing doesn't work. I think it does work, and we know that the military used it.
Brown.
Courtney Brown, thank you, Jay. Yes, so I knew I'd got the first name right. So he's very inconsistent, And I think again he's sort of playing to the crowd a bit with what he does, and he doesn't stick to the evidence. And it's a bit like channeled information that you get from psychics.
Mm,
Sometimes it seems to be amazingly accurate, and you can't believe how accurate it's been. And I'm talking personally now as well, from psychics. I saw a psychic last year, and some of the information she came out with was very accurate, and I've no idea how she could have, got it. Um, but then some of it is wildly off base. So again, you've got to try and verify it in other ways. But I think Courtney Brown as a guy, he's okay. He's a pleasant enough guy. I just think that he
mm,
he goes a bit beyond what his technique really allows him to say with certainty. And I think if you pushed him on that, he'd probably agree. He'd probably say that. He said, "Well, don't treat what I say as gospel or as firmed up."
mm.
If you really sort of pushed him on things. But I think people don't often take it too far.
I know what you mean. I mean, I've seen people, these viewers and that, and I actually do believe that they can actually, because we are transmitters as well as receivers, and I think they can pick up on brainwaves of what people are thinking. If you've just had a bereavement and you've lost somebody, you're thinking of that person.
Mm.
You're giving out, you're transmitting something. Because I've been to one of these sessions where a person says, "Hang on a minute, I've got someone called Fred. Yes, they wore brown boots." That's right, yes. And they did, and they build up and build up and build up. They're not cold reading, but it's as if they're picking up something that this person is transmitting. Although I do believe that there is evidence for entities that we can't see.
I
That
agree, totally,
go
yeah.
beyond it. So I'm not
Some and
debunking it. Don't get me wrong. Mm.
Jay has also brought up the Betty and Barney Hill case. Now, this is something that I've investigated myself. I've read their book, which is called The Interrupted Journey, and there is a very. Hang on, we'll get to that. Yeah, I'll
Okay,
just carry
sorry.
on because I'm going to get to all of that.
I'm sorry about that, Andrew. Sorry.
Yeah. So, so the Betty and Barney Hill case, for those that are not familiar, a quick summary of that. They were two well-respected people in their community. It's somewhere near the Canadian border, I think, in North America, in 1960.
64.
Was it
1964.
64? I have a
I believe
feeling it
so.
was it 64. Okay, well I'll go
Mm.
with that date. I can't remember the exact date, but this is
Oh,
in my book
hang on. It might be
acknowledged.
61. Sorry, 61.
Yeah,
I know
I
it's
thought it was 61. That was the date
61.
I
Yes,
was going to
sorry,
go
it is
for.
61. Yes.
So they were on a journey back. They'd been on vacation and they were driving back, and they saw this light in the sky. And at first they thought it was just Jupiter or Venus or something, or the moon. And then this started moving and it appeared to be following them. And then Betty, I think, had some kind of telepathic contact, and she knew it was going to land nearby, and they pulled over. It landed, I think, near them in a woodland clearing or at the side of the road or something. And then they were transfixed watching this thing that had landed, and some beings came out, and she, again, Betty, felt that they were going to be abducted. And it does indeed seem they were abducted, and you can read the rest of the story. It is really the first alien abduction case that's known about where medical procedures were conducted on the abductees. And there's a lot of evidence that what they say happened really did happen, and that's in their book, and it was written by, I think it was co-written by the guy that hypnotized them, and he did a very good job, because his job under hypnosis was not to try and establish the truth or lack of truth in their story. His job was simply to reduce the anxiety that they experienced after the fact, and he managed to do that. And he didn't really try and pass judgment one way or the other on the case, although he suspected that Betty had had a dream and Barney was somehow, getting affected by this dream, and that's what he wrote in the book. But he didn't say that's definitely what happened. He said that was the best explanation he could come up with, but he wasn't necessarily trying to debunk their story. So it's a very fair, even-handed account, that Interrupted Journey book, and you can get it on Internet Archive as a PDF. So, and you probably get it on eBay dead cheap and on Amazon dead cheap. So I recommend that people read that if they haven't. It's a very interesting book. So to bring up the Zeta Reticulum thing, again, that's one of the key elements that comes out of that story, that Betty was shown this star map by the alien, which was like a grey alien. And they had this conversation where the alien said to her, well, if I say the star that we're from, would you know where I mean? And Betty sort of said something like, well, don't know that much about astronomy, so probably not. So the alien said, well, let me show you this map. So the alien showed her this map on a screen or something. Again, this is all in the book, and it said, "Oh, we live on that star there." And so after she'd come back, she plotted out this star map on a sketch on a piece of paper with, I don't know, about 20 or 30 dots or something in a configuration, and I think she drew some lines on it saying, "Oh, these are trade routes" or something. And again, that's all in the book. And then she gave this star map to a lady called Marjorie Fish, who got interested in the case. And then what she did over many years was she kind of looked at astronomical catalogues, like the where all the stars actually were in relation to one another. You can actually measure where the stars are in space using various methods. This is such as the use of variable stars or Cepheid variables. So I know a little bit about astronomy. And this is what Marjorie Fish did. It took her years, and she established that the most likely star that the aliens were pointing out was this Zeta Reticulum star, because that was the only star where the stars around it matched the configuration that Betty Hill had drawn out. Now, I'm quite skeptical that Betty would have accurate enough recall to remember where all those stars were. But not only that, since Marjorie Fish produced that star map, which I think was in the 70s, it was the late 60s or early 70s sometime, they've now had more accurate measurements of stars. For example, the Hipparcos satellite that was sent up, I think, in the late 80s or mid 80s, and that produced much more accurate data about the relative positions of stars in our galaxy. And it catalogued, I don't know, about 10 million stars or something. I forget the exact figure. You can look up Hipparcos and find that out yourself. I mean, that will be online. And there've been other star catalogues updated since then. And then if you use that star catalogue with Betty and Barney Hill's map, or Betty Hill's map, the results are less conclusive. So you can't say for certain that it was Zeta Reticulum. There's a bit more doubt introduced. So I'm not sure about that one, because this Zeta Reticulum thing, this has been brought up by several different people, and I'm not sure how much faith we can place on that would be the origin of any alien race. There's this, what's her name, Nancy Leader. She talks about the Zetans, the Zeta Reticulans, that she's meant to have been in communication with for years, but she's provably come out with false information that she hasn't retracted.
Well, that's
Some
the
of it
thing.
again has been okay, but again, some of it she's come out and said, well, uh, she hasn't corrected herself, basically, which I always have a big problem with. But yeah, what Chris says is true. Yeah.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning they were a mixed race couple when
Yeah,
it was
correct.
not the norm at the time.
Their
So
story leaked out. They told a few people at their church group about what happened to them quietly, and then they told it to the local newspaper, and within 2 weeks, the whole thing was all over the place, and there was all these rumors and false stories going out. And they thought, right, after I think a year or 2 years, look, we've got to write this out in a book to set the record straight. I'm just fed up of all these
yeah,
people talking nonsense. So that's what they did. But I think the Zeta Reticulum story, I think it's, that what Betty Hill didn't actually say that they were from Zeta Reticulum, these aliens. She said they were from a distant star, and it was Marjorie Fish that said it was probably Zeta Reticulum based on that drawing that you gave me. So that's where that story originated. It wasn't a certainty by any stretch of the imagination.
but what
So
about
there you
that
are.
tribe in Africa?
Yeah, so that's much more. That's in my book too. Yes, the Dogon tribe,
Dogon
which is a
tribe. Yes,
sub-Saharan tribe.
very interesting.
They were investigated by a French anthropologist in the 60s or the 40s, and he realized that their culture revolved around an invisible star that they couldn't possibly know was there, Sirius B, and they knew that it was a white dwarf star, and they knew that its orbit around another star was 50 years long, and that wasn't known about then, and that particular star was only photographed, I think, in 1977. Because it was so close to its parent star, Sirius A. And there's a whole, Robert Temple wrote the book about that called The Sirius Mystery. And again, I've written that up in my acknowledged book. And there are a few problems with what Robert Temple later claimed, but the basis of the story is sound. And that does appear to be good evidence that there was contact between an extraterrestrial race and that African tribe, many centuries ago. I think that's one of the only explanations that works. And I think the other ones about them picking this up from the anthropologist, in the 60s, that doesn't hold water. Their
Oh no,
whole
you
country.
wouldn't change it.
No.
No. But
So
Louis, sorry, Andrew,
I
carry
was
on.
just going to say that also in the book that I wrote, Acknowledged, which is available from Check the Evidence free for the PDF, you will learn that Carl Sagan was actually one of the people that was instrumental in starting the ancient aliens narratives. It was him that actually came up with some early statements. And in fact, it was Carl Sagan that gave the name the Elysium Pyramids on Mars from the Mariner probe in, I think, the 1966. So folks, it was Carl Sagan that started a lot of that stuff, So what does that tell you? Well, you might want to know that Carl Sagan was not just your TV astronomer. He had a top secret security clearance, and he worked on a secret program in 1959. He was a consultant on a military program where they wanted to send a nuclear bomb to the moon. So Carl Sagan, folks, had a top secret military clearance, in case you didn't know it. And there's a document that shows that. That was only released, I think, in about 2011 or something. I've got that in my book. So things are not always as they seem.
Oh no, but it's interesting what ancient. No, hang on. Sorry, it's got here. It says true about the Dogons, yet there are different races in contact. Some good, some not so good. And Louise Wilcox has said, sorry, but if governments are feeding the people alien stories, then I, for one, don't believe a word of it. I think what governments do, they use a story for their own use. So what they'll do, they get a core of truth and then hey, swings
That's
all
right.
around.
So what Louise says right
No,
there, I mean, I've written an article about that because we've seen an increase in the UFO stories in the last year with this David Grush coming out with all these stories. And Stephen Greer, for example, who did the Disclosure Project, which is what kicked me off in all of this back in 2003 when I discovered it. He did another disclosure event in June, 22 years after the original event, and it was almost an rerun of it, an identical rerun, as if nothing had happened. And that to me was very telling. And Louise is right in that don't believe the stories that are coming out of the government. If you're interested to find out the truth about aliens and UFOs, it's hard work, folks. But if you want to make it a little bit easier, you can read my book because I've done a lot of the hard work for you. And the end result of that is, yes, there are aliens. Yes, they've been here. Yes, they've interacted with the people. Yes, there are some that are very like us and some that are not like us. As far as I'm concerned, I've just said a load of facts, not speculation. And in my book, I lay out the reasons for me saying that those are facts. Because this is such a big topic, you've really got to do your own investigation and don't believe the BBC and certainly don't believe Brian Cox or any of the TV scientists. And even some of the ones that operate in the UFO truth movement are not to be believed either.
Also, check the evidence. He's got the website there, so check the evidence. And also, Nick Pope's books are very good. If you put a hole through the corner of them, put a piece of string around them, and it saves you a lot on toilet paper. You just sort of hang it sort of very good for that. It's not too glossy as well. It's quite good,
Well, Nick Pope is a case in point, and I met Nick Pope on a couple of occasions. And again, some of the reports that he's come out with are fine. I think they're truthful, they're honest. But for example, you ask him about 9/11, and he says, "Oh yeah, that was done by 19 hijackers flying planes." And I've got a video of him saying that. So that right there shows you who Nick Pope is really working for, and he should know better than to say such things.
Pipers, as I call them.
Yeah, and you can read about Nick Pope in my acknowledged book as well. I write about what I know about him and what I've discovered about him. Bob Lazar's story. So Bob Lazar's story, yes, that's I think been
What does Andrew
redone.
think about Bob
Yeah,
Lazar?
yeah,
This
yeah.
is
I read the question. So Bob Lazar, he was this chap that claimed to have worked at Area 51 in 1988. Originally came out with the name Dennis, and said, I worked on a back engineering a flying saucer, and he described how the propulsion system worked. And then went on from strength to strength, and he worked with John Lear, and he got into all the papers through George Knapp, and was on all the TV, and said that he'd seen these documents saying that aliens came from, guess where, Zeta Reticulum. So there it came up again, and that's occurred in another one or two places. But Bob Lazar, my conclusions about that story is the basic story is telling is probably true in that he worked in Area 51. However, I don't believe that he worked on back engineering the craft of the engine of a craft. I don't think that part of his story is true. I think he had knowledge that somebody else had done that, and I have a feeling that he may have been hypnotized or something to tell that story as his own, and that's why he got certain details wrong, or certain details were kind of a bit ridiculous, really. Like he said that this craft was powered by element 115, which has been created now. It hadn't been created at the time he stated this. But if you look at the characteristics of element 115, I think only about 2 atoms of it have been created in the particle accelerator, and it's not stable. It breaks down immediately within like a few nanoseconds or something, or a few microseconds. So to say that there were 500 pounds of this and that was used as a fuel for the craft, I think that was disinformation. And I don't think this craft used any fuel. Whatever craft it was doesn't use fuel, not in that way. It uses ether propulsion, which doesn't need fuel. That's the whole point. So he was perpetuating the narrative of a craft needs fuel, and I don't think that's the case. And I think what was really happening was, if you look at Bob Lazar's background, what he did, he was well known because he built a particle accelerator in his backyard, right? And a particle accelerator is used to do experiments in nuclear physics, which is what he was doing. So I suspect that he was brought into Area 51 by Edward Teller, as he said he was, and he was in the Los Alamos National Laboratory's phone book, as George Knapp said he was. But I think he was brought in to work on some sort of secret propulsion project with some type of nuclear engine, because that was his area of expertise. But he couldn't talk about that because that was the black program. So he was told to put out this cover story when they were worried that something was going to leak out about this nuclear propulsion program. He was told to put out this cover story about back engineering a flying saucer, which I think was done by somebody else, not him. And I go through all of that in my secret space program book, which is also free. So you can see why I came to those conclusions.
Not bad. And also, my personal belief is there's diddly squat at Area 51. It's somewhere else they're doing it. That's
It
my
may
belief.
well have moved.
I
What we
really
do know is
believe
that
that
you could be
because
right, but then it's
Americans are brilliant at that, saying it's here when it isn't. It's somewhere else. I'm positive
sure.
it is.
But you've got to be quite careful, though, Chris, because I actually spoke to Edgar Fouché at length, and he showed me documents which proved he worked in Area 51 in 1979, I think it was, on the documents. Now, there might not be anything there now, but that's not to say there wasn't something there then. And there are two very interesting films from that area, at least two, actually, probably more. One was taken by Ray Wardle, and he was hounded after for that footage. You can go and look that one. It's a very interesting piece of footage, actually, that. And then the other one was, which is why I think Lazar did have genuine knowledge. He took John Lear and Gene Huff to Area 51, and he says, look, I know that on a Wednesday night between 10 and midnight, they fly these craft out from Area 51. They do test flights, and I know where they do it. And he took John Lear, and he said, look, let's drive up to this hill here, and you can film it. And he drove them there at the time, and guess what? They filmed something coming out of Area 51 at that exact time. So, you've got to explain that. So I think
Yeah,
that's why he did have some genuine knowledge. That's one
interesting.
of the reasons.
But you've upset a lot of Brian Cox enthusiasts here. I mean, some cat says Cox is hilarious. Yes, I'd agree with you there. And as another fan of his here, I don't think Andrew says Cox is a dick. Yes, I think you would. I would describe him that as well. He's, he's a man that has an answer for everything, but an answer for nothing.
An answer of nothing. We do, he says. I mean, Richard's got that very good sort of summary of Brian Cox, where he's asked all these questions, and he says, "Oh well, we don't know, but you know," and it's quite revealing when you see that string of questions, you know.
You should
And
carry on
yeah, so
playing
there
the
you are.
drums, I think, and being a crap drum player.
Yeah,
I think.
yeah,
Anyway, we're
yeah.
going
I
to
think you're
talk
probably right.
about if you can get over to
Mm.
this crops is something I'm really fascinated in.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So what we're going to talk about then is the origin of agriculture,
Mhm.
which is not something you think about a lot. And I got interested in this quite a few years ago now because of Lloyd Pye. And Lloyd Pye became known to me because of the Star Child skull investigation. And I just posted an old video of that from that I did. I did a presentation in 2017, and somebody did a very good video of that. Good audio, good visuals, good editing, and I posted that yesterday. I reposted it because I didn't have a copy on my channel, and I asked the person if I could repost it, and they let me. So Lloyd Pye, he became very interested in human origins. You know, where did Homo sapiens come from? And he read Zecharia Sitchin's books, the Earth Chronicles, and the first one was called The 12th Planet, I think, and that was, I think, released in 1976. And Sitchin argued that what had actually happened in ancient times, I think about 300,000 years ago, is that a race of beings called the Anunnaki, who are supposedly described in the Bible, had come down, you know, from
Oh, you're still there. I think we lost you a bit there. Can't hear you. Can't hear you. Dead. Sounds dead. The sound's gone. I don't know what's happened. Um, um, there we go. I've just sent him a message saying his sound has gone. I can't hear you. Might be better. Do you want to reboot? Maybe better to reboot. Yeah, he's rebooting. To reboot. Better say that. Right. So we'll go over to chat, and whilst he's rebooted, perhaps the aliens have got in and seen to his internet. That's what's happened. Right. We got here? Duck Egg says, "Evening. Got me spliff. Got was it? Got me spliff. Got me bitter. Engaged brain. Yes, I think it's the best thing to do actually." Nathan Lucas says, "Cox is, as his name suggests, a most unfortunate looking, backward thinking, cringe-tastic moron." Oh, you're praising them a bit there, aren't you? I think you'd have to improve to be rated as that. Right. Now, Ancient Ruby says, "I had a great conversation with Lloyd Pye years ago. It was rather interesting." Well, that's interesting. Right, we've got.
that work now.
It works. We're going to hold a seance. So, are you with us? Yes, you're with us now.
Yeah, I
So,
don't know what it is.
all right.
It just cut out here this end. It's just something on this computer, I think, or this browser. So you
Watching
lost me when I
YouTube,
was
they're
talking.
tuning in. You know, they're
No,
thinking,
I
"Oh,
think
hang
no,
on, hang on."
it's a bit flaky, this computer. There's certain problems with the drivers. So
Okay,
we got to Zecharia Sitchin. Did you hear me talk about
that's right.
Zecharia
Yes,
Sitchin?
that's right. Switching.
So let's resume there. So Earth Chronicles, I think it's mid 70s, 76. He said that the Anunnaki had come down from Nibiru, and they'd taken one of the hominids and then created Homo sapiens. And Lloyd Pye wrote about this in some of his books, and he pointed out that chimpanzees, who are considered our closest living relatives, have 48 chromosomes, but humans have 46. So where did these two other chromosomes go? This is not really explained. It's not really addressed by mainstream science. And so that's a question to be answered. And Lloyd said, well, if you look at the chromosomes, it looks like they were fused together. And so it looks like there was genetic engineering going on. And there's more evidence of this has emerged. In fact, I was watching a lecture, I think a week or two ago, which Mark Antony had posted on his Facebook. It was a talk by Bruce Fenton, which was given at Kieran Woodhouse's group in Birmingham 2 or 3 weeks ago. And it's called the Migration into Africa, I think. And Bruce, he doesn't talk about Lloyd Pye, but he shares similar data and evidence that Lloyd was talking about 20 years ago. So people can check that out. So anyway, so this brings us on to this idea of an alien race coming to the Earth and interfering with Homo sapiens development. And it does appear that something like that did happen. And the other thing that Lloyd told me about, this is all tied into the creation of agriculture and stuff. The other thing that Lloyd told me about was the research of Elaine Morgan in the 1970s. And she wrote a book called The Aquatic Ape. And I write about this also in my acknowledged book. Elaine Morgan, she pointed out that if you look at human beings and compare them, for example, to apes, there are some very important differences. Like, for example, we have enlarged sweat glands. Apes don't have that. We have the ability to hold our breath voluntarily. Chimpanzees can't do that. We regularly walk bipedally. Chimps don't do that. The way our hair is arranged, chimps have hair in the places we don't, and vice versa. And there are certain differences in sexual organs as well, substantial differences, certain differences in internal organs. We have a layer of what's called subcutaneous fat. Chimpanzees don't have that. However, if you go and look at dolphins, what do dolphins have? Well, dolphins have enlarged sweat glands. They have subcutaneous fat. They have certain similarities with their sexual organs that we have. Their kidneys are very similar to human kidneys, yet they're not considered as anything close to one of our living relatives. But it's said, for example, going back to the Dogon story that we talked about, this race of aliens that came and interacted with the Dogon, guess what? They were said to be a race of fish people. So isn't that interesting? I mean, Elaine Morgan never talked about that.
No, so we're sometimes born with gills, aren't we? As they say, you could have like sort of marks down here. So
really? I've not heard of that. That's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting.
And there are also
okay. That's interesting. So maybe that's got something to do with it. I'll have to look that one up. I hadn't heard of that. But I've got a table in my book where I go through, there's about 10 of these differences, which are actually come from Elaine Morgan's book originally. And I just sort of slightly updated it and changed one or two of the words to clarify it a little bit. And that's in my knowledge book as well. So this is all pretty hard evidence, scientific evidence, that something very strange happened in our evolution, which doesn't match what the story of Darwinian evolution tells us at all. It doesn't match at all. And also the other thing that's similar to the discussion of our similarity to dolphins is our similarity to pigs. And many of the listeners will know, for example, that in fact this happened to my sister. She had a heart valve transplant. Where did the heart valve come from? It came from a pig. How does that happen? And pigs are very intelligent. Pigs have sort of flesh similar to our own in terms of the fat levels and things like that. But guess what? The domestication of pigs, cows, and sheep, that suddenly happened, I think, about 7,000 BC, about 10,000 years ago. Before that, there was no record of it. And it all happened in the area of what's now Turkey and Iraq, and that was called Samaria. And that's the area that Sitchin says the Anunnaki, came and landed there and started a civilization. They started modern civilization in Samaria, and this is where agriculture started. Okay, so those are all, you can't really dispute those facts according to the anthropologists and the archaeologists. Everyone agrees that the domestication of animals started, I think, again, I might have some of the dates slightly out here, so forgive me if I get those wrong, but you can check those in, Britannica.com, or not. I don't recommend anyone checks anything in Wikipedia, but you can look there if you want. But Britannica.com, for example, is a good site for just standard mainstream science and history and stuff. So you can look at all of those facts, and you can see some of these are blatantly obvious. Like we do have certain similarities to dolphins and things like that. Oh, you just disappeared momentarily.
That's all right. It does it every week. Yeah, we're back. I don't know quite why it does it, but it does it. So it's a bit late this week. It's normally a bit early, but never mind. So we're back again.
It's an eclipse. You were eclipsed.
That's right. I've been eclipsed. Yeah.
Total crystallar eclipse.
It's a eclipse on my bald head. That's what it is.
There you go. So, and then tied in with this domestication of animals very closely is the domestication of certain plants, and how, because up until about 10,000 years ago, most human societies were what's called hunter-gatherers. And this documentary, I'll show you I'll put the link in the chat. I'm not sure if the chat is working for me because I can't seem to put any links. I'll paste it to Chris and you can put it in the main chat if it'll go to you. I'll try and put it in the main chat, but it gave me an error before. So let's see if that works.
The weird thing is hunter-gatherer societies worked less than the farming societies.
Correct. Now that's what we're going to come on to. Seahop said... Seahop has said Sitchin was a proven fraud. Not true. That's not true. I think certain things he said were disinformation. And I also write in my book about the video of Sitchin where he seems to be involved in a Masonic ceremony and he hides his face. So it appears that Sitchin was a Freemason, and I think he wasn't so much a fraud. I think he was he was putting out a certain narrative for people to pick up on, and it was a narrative that was put together deliberately. But going back to what Chris was saying about hunter-gatherers, yes, it does seem that you get this idea, if you don't study the evidence, that it was a very hard life. They were always out hunting and gathering because there wasn't enough food. Not so. It appears that the hunter-gatherer societies, and some of them still survive, like, for example, in Ethiopia, there are still hunter-gatherers living in Ethiopia. And again, what I've recently seen in this documentary, which the link is for in the chat, psychological operations, PSYOP, yes, PSYOP indeed. I get it took me a while, but I get your label now. So if you look at this documentary, it doesn't mention Zecharia Sitchin, by the way, this documentary. It's not based on his research. It's based on a lot of other research. But it talks about hunter-gatherer societies and the archaeological evidence, because they found skeletons from hunter-gatherer societies and looked at their general health. And these people were in good health when they died, and they were strong physically. Their bones were in good condition. Their teeth were in good condition. And then they found bones from people that lived in agricultural settlements that had started to, work the land and grow crops. And they're often malnourished. They have poor teeth. Their bones are very weak or damaged or injured. Certain evidence of disease and stuff. Very much different. And that's not really talked about that much, but if you look at this alternative history of agriculture, which is on the Versa Doco, I recommend all their documentaries. Actually, they're all very good, very good. They show you, for example, wild wheat. If you look at wild wheat, it's you can't eat it, or you can eat it. It's not that it's poisonous, but you need like fields and fields of wild wheat to make a loaf of bread, because the seed heads are so tiny, and you don't get much edible material from each seed head. So it's not really a viable wild wheat is not a viable crop, not really. And I think the same can be said for corn. Then again, about 10,000 years ago, there were, and the documentary points this out, in 5 different countries, Ethiopia, I think, or Central Africa is one area, 5 different areas. I think there was mostly in the equatorial regions, like Central America, Central Africa, in China somewhere. I think that it highlights 5 different regions in this documentary. Suddenly, we have modern wheat appearing out of nowhere, overnight, basically, and several communities are now growing wheat in the fields. And if you look at the genetics of the wheat seed, this is something I didn't realize, but it's shown in this documentary, and scientists come on and talk about this. The genome for wheat is actually more complex than the genome for humans. And
Really?
yeah, there are, I think, there are 3 different DNA strands or something. We've got a double helix or something, and it's got a triple helix or something. It explains it all in this documentary, and it really shows you from the science, that they use for doing DNA testing, that whoever did this with the wheat, they really did a job on it. They seem to have created this genome for wheat, and they knew what they were doing. And there's virtually no question that this was done. The genome for wheat was created in a laboratory, and it can't have just evolved overnight. It's way too complex, to have evolved that way. So that's one of the key arguments that they make, that wheat came out of nowhere. It appeared simultaneously within, I don't know, 100 years or something, or 50 years, something like that, even less than that, in 5 different regions, which didn't have any trade between them or anything like that, not back 10,000 years ago. So we have that to explain. And then we've got this switch from the hunter-gatherer society to settled communities which were living off the land, growing crops. And then it shows you, like, I think you pretty much made this point, Chris, already, that the working the land was very labor intensive initially. Obviously now we've got all the machines that do the bulk of the work, but back then it was very, very hard labor for people. And so what did you need? You needed a lot of people to work the land, to do the labor to harvest the crop. So a lot of people are invested in that work. And because of that, what did you need? Well, you needed a city, you needed civilization, you needed a system of laws. And then what would happen is the people that were in charge of growing the corn or harvesting it or keeping it, what happened? Well, they then had a currency, didn't they? Because they could stockpile the grain and then sell that to whoever, or barter it for labor or for goods or whatever. Everyone needs food, so they became the kingpins. So, in other words, what the documentary really illustrates is that many of the problems that we now have, with money being centralized or having a centralized control, and resources being centrally controlled, that's come about because of organized agriculture and those civilizations that were organized around agriculture. In other words, once you left the hunter-gatherer model of living, where there's no hierarchy, everyone just gets what they need, they feed their own family, maybe another family, so small tribes, small communities, they live off the land, no problem, they have a good lifestyle. Once you move away to this organized crop system, organized agriculture, everything changes. And that's what I think was the key thing, understanding for me, that came out in this documentary. That happened before the creation of money and banking. So the reason why we had money and banking was a result of having agriculture that was not, hunter-gatherer society. Because in a hunter-gatherer society, you don't need money in the same way. You just don't need it. It's just not that. demand. You have a simple accommodation, simple lifestyle. You're often on the move to find new places to feed. So you just don't have what we have in the culture we have now. So all the issues that we have with our culture actually started as a result of agriculture, and that's one of the key elements of this. And if you watch the documentary, there are many other key points that it brings out along those lines, and it does go into this point that somebody brought this agriculture here. It came from elsewhere. This wasn't something that hunter-gatherers created. It was brought here, and people were essentially persuaded into using this system and model, and it was done because it benefited somebody else. In other words, this group that came here, it was to their advantage that we would grow crops. And if you look at the crops that are grown, they're actually not all that good for human beings. They're not as nutritious. They're higher in sugars. They're higher in certain substances. And it's a very different diet to the hunter-gatherer societies. However,
Oh yes,
it,
it's very true.
if you look at the elites, for example, it then goes. This was the other interesting part of this documentary. What's another name for one of the elites or the royals? One of these terms we have, the blue bloods. It looks at the term the blue bloods and what that means. We just use it as a phrase. We say, oh yeah, the blue bloods. But what they're actually talking about in the documentary is why that term was used. The blue bloods is another name for the elites, and this idea that they are another bloodline. What does that mean? Their blood is physiologically, chemically different to our blood, and ne'er the twain shall meet. That's why they want to keep these bloodlines separate. And of course, David Icke has written a lot about this, and and other people have as well. And Fritz Springmeier, he's written this book called The 13 Bloodlines of the Illuminati. Now, they don't mention that in this documentary, the Alternative History of Agriculture, but what they do mention is, for example, the blue blood being a different type of blood. Now, as people probably know, our blood, anyone know what our blood is based on? What is the base chemical of the base mineral of our blood? Anyone know?
No, I don't know.
I want to see if anybody knows the biology and stuff. Anybody know?
No.
I know it's not a tutorial really, but I like to try and get a bit of interaction.
Hang on.
Nobody knows, I don't think. Well, if you do know, that's fair enough. If you haven't had a chance to say whatever. So, our blood is based on iron. Okay. Now, iron is in the center of your red blood cells. Red blood cells are very unusual.
Hang on. Kate Holly, she got it right. Iron. There she is.
There you go. So DJ's got it, which was what we're going to come on to. So in the documentary, it makes the argument that, of course, not the argument, but it shows you that our blood is based on iron, as Kat Holly just said, and that goes into this so-called. Yeah. Anyone know what molecule it goes into in the red blood cell? Know what it's called? Why is our blood red? Because of the iron. But what's the molecule that creates that redness? Anybody know?
Don't know. Sorry.
Hemoglobin. So hemoglobin is the molecule in the red blood cell, and red blood cells are very unusual because they don't have a nucleus. All the other cells in the body, apart from red blood cells, have a nucleus, and red blood cells, I think, have a lifetime, I think, of 90 days or something. I forget the exact date. So your blood is recycled every 90 days. Regenerated, not recycled. And the old blood cells go into the spleen and then go out as bile in the gut, and you excrete them. So that's a bit of anatomy and biology there for you. So anyway, I digress. So they're saying that the blue bloods have different blood, and their blood is not based so much on iron. It's based on copper, which somebody DJ said blue is copper. And if you look at copper-based blood, if there is such a thing, and there are some sea creatures like octopi. This is what I didn't know. Octopi and certain other sea creatures have, guess what, blue blood, and it has more copper in it. And the problem with copper blood is that it's not so good at getting rid of carbon dioxide. It's okay at handling oxygen, which is what we need to breathe, but it's not so good at dealing with CO2. Isn't that interesting? That blue
There's
blood is
also
not so good at dealing with carbon dioxide.
apart from
And so,
octopus, but did you know? Sorry, I don't mean to show that. But apart from
um,
octopus, copper is lethal to aquatic life, which is if you
okay,
put copper in with tropical fish, they'll all die.
okay, yeah, I think it's in certain, yeah, it might be in certain
Hmm.
combinations, but I can sort of
Yeah.
see what you're saying. Yeah, certainly, yeah, certain copper chemicals probably would be toxic.
Hmm.
So, this documentary then says, well, if you look at the cereal-based diet, that actually works better if you've got copper-based blood. So all these cereals like wheat and maize and all of that, they're actually beneficial to the people that have more copper in their blood. It shows you this in the chemistry and the science.
Hmm.
It's not just a statement that's out there. It's very much science-based, this documentary. Of course, that's why I strongly identified with it. And so it gives you an answer and perhaps to why things are like they are. In the we've got all this money and law, and that all started from a system which was based on the fact that we had organized agriculture. But that system was not set up for our benefit. It was set up by another separate group that came here, and they essentially enslaved the human race. And they got them, they tricked them into this organized agriculture, and then they did that as slave labor. They needed slave labor to run that system. So it's their system. It wasn't something we came up with. And yes, they can appoint, you know, these people to look after the crops and stockpile the grain and pay them whatever, and make their families more well off. But again, it goes through all of this in the documentary, and I think that's very, very interesting that such things have been discussed, because it is, again, it's very scientifically based, and they go through some scientific papers and stuff, and some of the discoveries archaeologically which support these conclusions. But they come to very different conclusions than the mainstream, even though they're using mainstream evidence and studies to get to these results. So I think it's let's see how long this documentary is. I'll just have a quick squares. Yeah, it's an hour long, so it's a good length. I'll
It's
just
worth watching. It's a brilliant documentary. And
It is, yeah,
should we have a
yeah.
quick look in chat? Do you want a quick whiz in there, Andrew, or do you want to continue a little bit longer?
Yeah, I was just going to click. The ads have come up on this now. I need to put my ad blocker on. I was just going to see if there's any thumbnails which will remind me of anything.
I can actually put
There
this in
are.
the comments
Well,
after with the show, so people will be able to go to the. I can link it in the comments after,
yeah,
um,
yeah, I do.
because
I'm just
I
seeing.
think
Yes,
that that's the one you sent me, wasn't it, Andrew? Because it's
yeah, several
fascinating.
weeks ago, wasn't it? Yeah, it's called
That's
the
right. Oh, yeah.
alternative history of agriculture. Um,
It is a
and it's
really brilliant video. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was real worth watching, because but Urban Fox, who's coming on the show in a couple of weeks' time, but he doesn't know yet. Another one that doesn't know yet. Hello, Urban Fox. The Nephilim were in the earth in those days when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bear children to them. The same were the mighty men that were of old, the men of renown. It's interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a quote from the Bible. I'm sure Urban Fox will correct me if I'm wrong. Oh, there you go.
Genesis
Yeah,
6,
Genesis 6.
B2.
So, this is where Sitchin, and not just Sitchin, but there's other books that have been written by people like Michael Tellinger and Lloyd
Mm.
Pyers, I say, that back up some of this stuff. And, again, you can look at non-biblical sources like the Enuma Elish, which I think is a Sumerian legend. And that also has creation myths in there. And there's other references which I put in my knowledge book which tie into what's said in that documentary in a more of a tangential way. But it's
Mm.
to me it all stacks up, and just to repeat, really, it explains very much why society is like it is now. And essentially that whole system was started 10,000 years ago by somebody else, not us. So if anyone feels like an alien or whatever living in this type of society, then that's probably one of the reasons that you're somehow linking back to early human memories when we had a very different sort of life and we had a very deep connection to the earth, which has been essentially agriculture has been used to break that connection to a large extent, particularly now.
Because was it Hancock? He said something happened 10,000 years ago. He written that
Yes,
civilization was wiped out and had to
correct,
restart again.
correct. So
And
so I think that's
yeah,
when this other group came in. They probably saw that there'd been a great cataclysm at the end of the Younger Dryas, and there's a bit of debate about what that was. Some people think it was a comet which crashed into the North Polar ice cap, and destroyed most of that and caused this enormous 400-foot rise in sea level around the planet. And then other people think it might have been some massive electrical discharge from a brush with a comet or a large asteroid or something. The Electric Universe guys, I think I've said something along those lines. But again, I've looked at this for quite a while now, and I think Graham Hancock is very good on the lost civilization stuff. And I think there's a lot of evidence, not just established by Graham Hancock, but he's been one of the prime movers in it, which ties into what I've just been saying, and some of that I think is mentioned briefly in the agriculture documentary, and that all tied in with what Lloyd Pye told me, well over 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that he said, all the agricultural crops seem to come out of nowhere about 7,000 BC, all in Samaria. And there's not many that have been added. Certainly, the animals that we've domesticated, sheep, horses, cows, pigs, chickens, we haven't had any real the ones that we use for food. We've had no major additions since 10,000 years ago, and they all happened at the same time in that area. So
that's
there you
interesting
are.
because I used to know an anthropologist, and she was saying that societies that have a hierarchy are generally aggressive. Societies, hunter-gatherers that don't have a
Yeah,
hierarchy are the most peaceful. There's the Zoe tribe that they laugh all the time. They're really happy, and they go out hunting in the morning, and they rest of the afternoon they sort of laze around. They don't do very much, and they have a very happy
that's
life.
right.
They're a happy tribe, and when they were met, they smile at people, and they're not aggressive at all. And
That's right.
this
And
is
you think of how the lions and tigers, they live their lives and they just seem to lounge around, don't they, when they've done a hunt? I
mm,
know of course it's gruesome to watch the hunts, but that's their lifestyle.
well, that's it. I mean, I know that I think in Kenya, they can walk straight past the lions. They know when they've eaten, and the lions won't touch them. This is I can't think of the name of the tribe in Kenya now, but they certainly know, uh, how to survive. We wouldn't survive 5 minutes in savannah, and that's why I don't believe in evolution, because evolution, if we were a chimp that got lucky, we would have been eaten, because chimps are up in trees for a reason, because of predators. So I
Hmm.
don't.
Yeah,
Darwin doesn't do much for me. I'm sorry. But
that's
this is
right.
quite interesting what Robert Thames says. The river valleys that the first agricultural civilization started in, Sumeria, Nile, Indus, were all far more fertile 9,000 years ago than the hot deserts found there now. Yes, that's
That's
interesting.
right. That's right. Yeah. And I think there's that argument about the age of the Sphinx, which said there were very much wetter areas,
Mm.
sort of going back into like 20,000 years ago and stuff. But yeah, the Indus Valley civilization, that comes up when you get into sort of the Graham Hancock territory a few times. But I've actually not read about much about that. But there's some very interesting stuff that comes out of studying those things. And like the caves in Turkey, where you've got this huge underground city, And if anybody saw Graham Hancock's series on Netflix, oh gosh, what was it called that aired last year? And it was said to be the most dangerous series on Netflix. That I watched, I think, all of those, and they're very good. So I can recommend those when anybody that's interested in the ancient civilization stuff. And they wouldn't even let him film in one site in America because they thought he was just peddling disinformation, and he wasn't. You know, he was just trying to show you a picture from the air of this thing. And
Yeah, but surely that's up to us to make. This is what annoys me.
correct,
If he's
correct.
peddling disinformation, that's up to us to make our minds up, not for them. They have no right to tell us whether it's disinformation or not. But the thing is, wheat destroyed the human race. Ducky said that's very interesting. And then we've got J. Alfred Baldwin. Don't believe there ever was hunter-gatherers. That is interesting. All ancient people were highly advanced until a worldwide mud flood, which Michelle Gibson says was caused by the Philippa experiment, which
Yeah, I think
ceased.
I can decode that a bit. Let me decode that a bit.
If you could, I don't
So,
quite understand it.
yeah. So the
I'll put that on.
Philadelphia experiment was the USS Eldridge, which was the result. They did a
Oh,
secret
yeah,
experiment in
1942.
1943. Yeah, 42 or 43. I think it was
Yeah.
43, and various stories abound around that. I have studied that a bit. I haven't really written much about it, and it's a very interesting. I think something real happened. I don't think you can say that there was a reset from that. So might have been, but again, it's one of those areas of speculation, and I'm not familiar with Michelle Gibson. The worldwide mud flood, again, I don't really believe that as a thing, and I think a lot of what's been happening recently because of the work of people like Graham Hancock and others, and there's Forgotten Origins is another good site that's been going for years. Two Australian brothers, Evans, I think their name is. They've got a lot of
Oh,
good stuff
yes.
on their site.
Yes, they're
Maybe I don't know if
brilliant.
you've had them on. I can forget their names, but I think their surname is Evans. Forgotten Origins .net or .org. You can look that up. Again, I think what they've been uncovering and what Graham Hancock has been uncovering, it has been quite threatening to certain established interests. So I think what's happened, and this is my speculation, I can't prove it, but there's all these stories of the Tartarian Empire and the mud flood, they've been put out, connected to flat Earth, which is how they started about 7-8 years ago, and they're being used to discredit the more credible research into these ancient civilizations. Now, don't get me wrong, I think something like the Tartarian Empire could have existed, but there's a lot of people making YouTube videos now, and I've seen quite a few of these now. They're walking around all these cathedrals saying, "Oh yeah, that's an aerial, that was a transmitter,"
Oh,
you
I've
know,
seen that.
you know, and you know, I'm not, you know, I don't. They seem to just state this as a matter of fact, and they could be right. Don't get me wrong, and I'm not debunking all of this because I think if you look at the way, particularly spiritual energy works, they could be onto something. But I think again, the claims that they're making are going beyond what they're saying, and they're saying with certainty that these things were antennas or they were resonance generators or something. You can't say that with certainty in my book. You can only say it's a strong possibility, or this evidence and this linked together shows this. You can't just go around saying, "Oh, yeah, it's obviously a transmitter or a resonator or something." And I've seen this has happened about 5 years, and I think if you go and say that to people who are studying ancient civilizations, they're just going to say, "Look, I'm sorry, you can't say this." And then if you get into the things like the Chicago show, where they put all these buildings up in whatever it was, 1887 or something, the World Fair, yeah, there's some really interesting stuff there too, which I can't fully explain, and that's in more modern times. So
That's right.
I'm not
But
saying that this ancient knowledge, which has apparently been lost, hasn't been reused in more modern times. I think some of it has. So, you know,
oh,
yeah,
yes,
how
but
do you explain? So you get all these questions. How do you explain these buildings half submerged? Well, we don't. If you can tell me that you can name that building that you're talking about, and you can verify that there hasn't been a flood there in the last 100 years or something, or 200 years, or 500 years, then fair enough. But I haven't seen that evidence yet. And there are
Well,
various, like for example, you can look at Easter Island, for example, and you can see those heads. They extend about, I don't know, 20 feet above the surface, and then they're buried, sort of 30 feet under the surface. So we've got to establish whether something like that has gone on with some of these buildings and what's actually gone on. And I haven't seen that studied to my satisfaction yet. And I'm not saying I won't, but I haven't yet.
there's a lot of
But
ignorance out there.
yeah,
Because I mean,
that's right.
there's a chap on a video, and I couldn't stop laughing. He went to looked like a Norman church, a an old church, and you saw this long copper wire coming down. Yes, it's a lightning conductor. And it
Yes.
went into this metal piece, and he said, "Oh, that was that was a plug." No, it wasn't, because my background's architecture, and I know what it was. It's a datum point for surveyors, and what it is, it's a line with a circle with two lines coming out, and there's a number on it, and that number is the amount of feet above Newlyn, because it's a Newlyn datum point, because sea level was measured at Newlyn, and that was the standard sort of thing. So if you go to the City of London or anywhere like that, it's surveying is a doddle, because these points are telling you how high above Newlyn datum, and they put them on Victorian buildings. In this church, they had on the side. This chap thought it was an ancient thing that you could plug into and get
Yeah.
electricity from the sky. Again, ignorance. The other one is Stonehenge. Now, Stonehenge is, there's paintings of it in the 16th century and whenever. And there's some bozo that was saying, oh, it was only built in the 50s. No, it was rebuilt in the 1950s. I know, because in the 70s, up to the 1970s, they had an exhibition at Stonehenge when you could get in free, showing you how they rebuilt it. There was no conspiracy. It was all above board. And I went there as a little tot with my parents. And that's what I've never seen all the
Yeah.
photographs.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of ignorance
That's,
out.
well, I think some of it's ignorance and some of it is just making assumptions, and
Yeah.
not asking the right questions to the right people at the right time. So these are skills that you develop in research. If you really want to know the truth and you want to be sure of your statements, it can take a lot of work. And so, like you say, when you find that metal plate or whatever it is, you've got to
Newlyn
try and ask
Dayton.
somebody who knows what it is, rather than just reading a couple of websites and say, oh yeah, it's definitely this. Why do you say it's definitely that? What document or experiment or measurement can you show me that makes you able to draw that conclusion? You know, and this is where the value of science is still relevant.
Hmm.
And I wrote this article a year or two ago now, about the value of science, and the value of science comes from observation, analysis, and gathering data. When you talk about science, it doesn't just mean this corrupted, entity which runs, the pharmaceutical industry and runs the energy industry. That's a
Oh,
different
careful. Yeah.
element of science. The basics of science are observation, measurement, gathering data, and analysis, and an understanding of mathematical processes, an understanding of anatomical processes, an understanding of physics, an understanding of chemistry. Those are all things that I treasure and value, and I've worked hard to develop over the years. And that's independent of any, corruption in the university or in a corporation. It's independent of that. I've written an article about that. And unfortunately, if somebody doesn't understand an algebraic expression, they can't just say, "Oh, that's just wrong." You know, that's just wrong because I don't understand it. It can't be true because I don't understand it. Well, I'm sorry. All you can say is, I don't understand it, so I think it might be wrong. You can't make a declaration about something if you don't understand it. And as I point out in the work that I've done professionally, I developed skills in the work that I did, such that I was presented with new problems which no one had ever solved before, and I was able to solve them because that's what I was paid to do. And I could only solve them not by, sometimes it was by guesswork, but I solved most of them by understanding what was going on, using analysis, using my understanding of maths, for example, and solving that problem. And those are skills which are lacking in many areas of research that people now talk about, and they'll just and this is something Dr. Wood and I have discussed quite a lot about, having an opinion and an internet connection, and you can build up a big following and seen as an authority on something, when actually you have the basic measurement, basic data, and the basic analysis to support all of the statements that you're making. And you don't, these people don't say, well, actually, I'm speculating a bit here, but I think I'm correct. And I will do that if I think what I'm saying is speculation. I will say that. So that's an important point that people need to bear in mind, in my opinion.
It's a very important point, and I think also, I mean, I won't go into this too deeply because I don't want to set the claxons off at YouTube HQ, but now it's based upon finance. I think science. That's really what I think that is. I think I've summed that up in one sentence. Yes, I mean you could pay any bent scientist to say whatever they want, and if you pay them enough money, they will.
Right.
And
exactly.
That's it. I mean that is the most terrifying
So
part.
so real science requires skills of observation, analysis, measurement, analysis, but it also requires humility in that, I got that measurement wrong. That analysis I did was incorrect. That observation was incomplete. It was not accurate enough, or whatever. Or there was another observation which I needed to make and I didn't make. Those are those things often don't happen in science, and they should, when you need to get the correct answer to something. So that's one of the problems. And so then it boils down to ego, and admitting that you didn't do a good job, or you did overstate what the evidence showed you or something, because of whatever reason. You were paid money, or you had a deadline to meet, or you were worried about being ridiculed or something. So you deliberately missed something out, for example. And the only way to get around that is by being honest and truthful about what you're doing, and not being in fear of the consequences of being wrong.
But being wrong is actually how you learn, because you go through a series of mistakes to get things right. That's how you become wise. And I think that these people that are always got to be correct all the time. I've made loads of mistakes. I've been wrong on a lot of things, but I learned very, very quickly from it. It's if you don't learn from it, that's the problem. If you do learn from it, that's you're going forward. But
exactly, and I mean, I will say, for example, this couple of things have come up tonight. For example, the Tartarian thing and the mud flood. I've looked at that, and I don't think the conclusions that are being put out there are correct. But I could be wrong, because I also feel I haven't studied it enough. And then you get to the point, well, how much time do I want to invest in studying that? And from what I've seen, I don't want to invest infinite time in studying it. So I've got to say, look, as from what I can see, some of the stuff that's coming out is not correct, and it's not supported by the evidence. But I could be mistaken, so I'm quite comfortable in saying that, and I'm okay with saying, well, I don't know the full answer, but this is my best answer I can give you at this point.
Well, that's I mean, if we can go back into chat again, we've got Robert. Hello, Robert. He's coming on in a couple of weeks' time, but he doesn't know yet. Late to the party this evening. Busy spinning plates. Good evening, all. Nice to see you. To see you nice. Hello, Robert. He's a regular on the show. And then we got here, baby with a laser. Duck Egg, I agree. I cut out wheat and lost 3 stone, and all aches and pains went. Yes, I cut out wheat as well. My mate, and same happened to him. Wheat is poison. Why everyone is fat. Yes, I don't eat bread anymore. It was a bit hard giving it up, but it did the trick, because bread is, especially the bread you have now, it's not really bread. And it's tough. It really is tough, because we're actually born to eat. Well, I was weaned on bread. My parents had nothing but bread. Right. Mind you, I had a good diet when I was a kid. So this is Cat. They said, so all the blue blooders are what's causing the fake climate emergency. Who knows? Yes.
Could be. That's a point I thought about after I watched that documentary, because of their concern over CO2 levels, which they apparently can't handle as well.
Right. Perhaps another reason to why they spray our skies. I mean, I heard one the other day that said that they're after our souls.
Yeah, I
Who
think so.
knows?
Yeah, read my book, Ancient Ruby: Climate Change and Global Warming Exposed. I'm not so sure about the spraying and what that is. I
I
think
don't know.
there's something else going on that is claimed by the mainstream and is claimed by the alternative movement. And you can read about that in my book. Why I spent 9 years investigating that.
That's interesting. We must give your book a good plug. I hope you've got a copy of your book there so you can show it to this camera.
No, I
But
haven't actually.
oh
I can
dear,
get it on my
oh
website. I'll get it on the website, and then you can see what it looks
okay.
like. But you carry on talking, Chris, with the chat.
Blue bloods being less tolerant to oxygen. Quite prophetic, maybe. That's interesting. Yes, yes. Because I always thought the blue bloods was to do with the what's that? Oh, silver, is it? Silver on their spoons and something, but I don't know. Was it that a lot of silver came off and turned their blood blue if they had too much of it? But I don't know
Oh
too much.
yeah, yeah. That might be a yeah. Okay.
Right, and this is Stephen Truthseeker. Back me out what I said. Copper is a poison to aquatic life. I've kept tropical fish, so
Oh,
that's
it's backing up what you said then. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I know that because I know that. Was it Dr. Fleetwood? I was talking to him the other day, and he said that he had tropical fish, and he accidentally somehow they got copper in the tank, and it killed all the lot. Only a
Yeah.
little bit as well.
Yeah.
Um, Now this is interesting. Ancient Rome says reptilians are copper based,
Okay.
and
I'm not so sure about that. It could be true. I'd like to see the reference for that. That'd be
it is
interesting if that's
very
true.
that is interesting. Yes, I don't know. It is a very bare bones SG, but it has a nice sounding pickups. Does it really? Oh, what? I think he's in conversation with somebody there.
Could be.
Right.
Yes. Could be.
Now, this is an interesting one. All churches, mosques, etc., were originally healing places. I've heard this. This is J. Alfred Baldwin. I reckon before the timeline hijack. Yes, because if you look at churches, you look at the seating, it's a modern thing and it doesn't quite work. You look at the old cathedrals and things. Um, so yes, you've got a very good point there. They do seem to be healing places of healing. The same with the pyramids. If you read Supernature, which was published in the 1970s, um, I know that an office I worked in, we did an experiment where we sharpened razor blades using pyramid at a certain
Yeah.
dimensions. And I think, if I remember right, I think it worked. Yes.
It does
Um,
work. Yeah.
yes. You've got something on the screen there. Would you like me to show it, Andrew?
Yes, please. Yeah, that's just the book that I referenced. And that's the book of where I did an investigation of chemtrails over 9 years, and a lot of other stuff in there as
Excellent.
well. So if you want to read all about chemtrails and some of the false information that's been put out about them by the so-called truth movement, then you can get that book for free. And please share it with everybody.
Well, I mean, we could do that. I mean, I could do a whole show about that because I think that what's happened is controlled opposition is extremely skillful. And what has happened is the truth movements have become a cult, in which the cult following follows GB News, UK Column, and someone from Luton who I won't mention. And that is a cult following. They come out with some lots of very interesting things, yes, but there is no solution to the problem. They don't get to the root cause of the problem. And my personal belief, and this is what Richard D. Hall covered, and that is usury, because usury is probably the root. If you abolish usury, then you've solved half the problem and then arrested the usury scammers. That's my personal belief. And Richard D. Hall did a very good. I think it's still up on his show, on his website, where he actually exposed usury for what it is. And I think that's another reason they might be getting at him. He did this about 4 or 5 years ago. Do you remember that, Andrew? Hang on, you got quiet again. It's It's gone quiet. Hang on. Right. Okay. I'll go over to chat whilst Andrew's got.
Can you hear me now? Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're on now. Yeah. Sorry, you was talking away. We couldn't hear a word of you.
Well, I think I'm going to have to ring off, or end the go off now. So.
Okay, we're up to our time anyway.
Yeah,
so
it's not playing ball. This sound.
No, it's you get computers like that. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. And we was going to go on to the skulls, but do you fancy doing that on another show, Andrew? Yes, I think Andrew's he's got problems with his internet there. Well, thank you very much for joining us tonight, Andrew, and he'll be back soon. And what's happening is
I think you can probably hear me, but I'm going to probably dive off now. And
well, we're ending the show anyway.
My microphone is playing up again. I think this audio driver's a bit ropey or something.
I think what it is, it's StreamYard. It's RAM.
Weird.
It's RAM hungry StreamYard. That's what the real problem is. So that's why I want to go to a different type of software. But thank you very much for joining us tonight. And please come back and tell us about those skulls. I'm very interested about that. And please join us. Now, remember, there's the mystery show that's coming on the weekend. BitChute only, Odyssey and Rumble only. But the main one is BitChute. So with a mystery guest, so I won't say who. That's being recorded tomorrow night. And of course, join me same time, same place on Monday, when we're going to be talking to Yorkshire Roads, which is going to be interesting. And also next Thursday at 8 o'clock. So Monday at 8 o'clock. That's, of course, assuming, he's gone. That's, of course, assuming that YouTube haven't banned me. So thank you very much for joining us tonight. And excuse me, I'm a bit tired tonight, so I'm not my normal self. But I'll see you, as I say, over the weekend on the recorded show. And live, he's back again. Here we go. And live next week at 8 o'clock. Thanks, Andrew. And
thanks. I hope you can hear me again now. This headset keeps cutting out. It's just USB.
I understand. We'll have a little word after the show. And thanks for joining us. And whatever happens, have a laugh.